Hi, it's Anna. Thanks for tuning in. So today I want to share a knowing that has been really helpful for me on this journey, and that's simply that simplicity is key. And I actually feel that as long as we are listening and tuning in and attuning to our guidance, our divine guidance is actually reminding us of that quite regularly. And I think we all have actually a deep knowing of this. Um, so this is just a reminder because on this journey, what I've realized is that we are sort of like we're trying to balance the heart and the mind, right? And the thing is that the mind craves complexity, and that's the issue that we have to combat in a way, to bring things back into balance and into wholeness. We need to balance and train our mind to come back to simplicity like a muscle. We need to actually do it over and over again, especially at the beginning. But whenever we actually feel that we're going into too much complexity, it should actually be used as an alarm system to bring ourselves back to simplicity. Because the path is actually simple. It's very difficult, the most difficult thing you'll ever do, but it's actually quite simple. So I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about the extremes of things. So we'll start with overcomplication, and then I'll also touch a little bit on oversimplification because that's also an issue, obviously. Um, so overcomplication, like I've mentioned, this is actually in this society where we've really emphasized on the mind and the brain and complexity and fragmentation of truth, and we have an overacting mind. um, we have this drive to, because this muscle has been built so much in this day and age, we have this drive to want to overcomplicate everything, and we almost crave it. It almost like our lower ego craves that, right? And so we tend to think sometimes that surely it's not that simple. Surely it's so much more complicated than that. Surely I need to read all these books, or I need to find all these experts and take all these courses, or surely yeah, surely it just can't be that simple, right? And so or surely I need to go down all these rabbit holes because I probably don't understand as much, or surely there is some secret knowledge or secret ritual that I haven't found yet that's going to unlock things for me. And that's actually not how the path works. Um, and you need to build that knowing. You actually need to build the knowing that actually simplicity is key and that the path is actually simple. Um, because in this day and age, when the way we are currently navigating this path is made even more complicated because, and even more difficult, because not a lot of people are coming back to this knowing of keeping things simple. So that's why a lot of the information out there is very popular, because it's just so polarizing, so complex. It's fragmenting you into more and more fragments of truth. So you spend so much time becoming an expert into all these little pieces of the puzzle, instead of understanding that we need to use little pieces of the puzzle but come back to a whole, and view things quite simply, actually. And it's even more difficult because this way of wanting to overcomplicate things as well, this drive that we have that feels good because we're so used to it, it's actually also a way to avoid pain. And so, on this path, obviously, I've mentioned many times before, this path is actually quite painful. There's a lot of shedding that needs to happen, a lot of, feeling grief and pain and all this unprocessed stuff that we have. Um, when we spend all that time gaining that knowledge and that complexity, then it can be a way to bypass feeling what we don't want to feel. and bypass taking the action that we actually have to take, right? Um, it can be a way that we distract ourselves, going down all these rabbit holes and spending all that time figuring things out, right? Um, and there's a healthy way of doing that. It doesn't mean that we don't do any of that stuff. But what I'm talking about is when we overcomplicate things, and you will feel it in your body. That's been the path for me. I feel it. I feel when I'm going too deep into things, and it's almost like I've got this alarm bell in my system, this pinging in my gut that brings me back to center. And it's also very useful to do that, right? To bring yourself back to this knowing that simplicity is key, and I have to come back to basics at moments where you're in a crisis. There are different moments on this path that are harder than others, and when things become really difficult, when you feel like you've hit rock bottom and you're really struggling or processing a lot of grief for whatever reason, whatever's happening in your life, bringing ourselves back to the basics is so helpful. So slowing down, um, becoming more present in our body and in our life, um, switching off social media and no longer reading books for a while, um, just bringing ourselves back to the mundane of life, grounding in nature, going for nature, slow nature walks, all that stuff can be so useful to bring it back to the basics. And it's similar as well with the example of healing our health. You can go down rabbit holes that are going to make you take all these um, supplements and vitamins and try all these things, and it's like the information that's out there sometimes is like a beast, like you feed on it, and then you get stuck in all these different things, and it just becomes so too much. And when that happens, you stop and you realize that actually healing our health, so much can be healed when we bring it back to basics as well, right? Not always, obviously, but even when it's a complicated health issues, instead of trying to figure it out on your own, hire an expert, right? Um, but often we think it's very complicated, but it's not. So healing our gut health, for example, so much can be achieved by simply removing processed foods and eating the rainbow, eating a wide variety of colors so that you get all the vitamins, minerals, different elements, and probiotics that you need, right? So this is what we need to understand, having the awareness that it's a huge drive that our ego has to get into complexity, that can actually make us lose ourselves and lose track of things and loop and not progress on this path, and bringing it back as needed, making sure that you feel that alarm bell system and bring yourself back to simplicity as needed. Because like I've mentioned, the path is actually very simple. On the other side of the spectrum, there is obviously the oversimplification of things, and this is what's happening in pop culture a lot of the times, where even words have lost their meaning, right? Like I'm noticing an homogenization of terms where they don't really actually mean what they were intending to mean anymore, and they actually mean a lot of different things into one word, which makes it very confusing, and it's actually preventing people from truly healing on this journey. I think I've mentioned before, I feel that about the term codependency, the fact that it actually doesn't mean what it was intending to mean initially, and now it's actually lost its meaning. Um, and there are things you can't explain in one word. It's just, that's just how it is. You could also argue that the term narcissism and narcissist is the same. It's like a bastardization and a homogenization of words where at this point everyone has trauma and everyone's a narcissist, when we all know it's not the case, right? So oversimplification is also not an answer, obviously. So I mean the middle path. I mean, words still matter, words still have meaning, Um, but so we do keep things simple, but we still retain the meaning of things, so we can actually truly progress. Um, and one thing that I want to mention as well is that uh, this thinking that, surely things can't be that simple, surely it's more complicated than that, um, can actually be a way unconsciously that you reject truth. So it's going to be a way you might come across information or a teacher online that's actually speaking very simply, and you might reject that because it's just not feeding that need for complexity that you have. Or on the other hand, rejecting people in your life actually that will, speak the truth very simply. Like, I can see that in this case, you probably need to do that, you need to look at this, and rejecting it because you don't want to. And the problem with that is that if you start, you know, rejecting all these people or blocking people from your life or online, then you end up in an echo chamber where you're no longer being challenged. And because that's the thing, right? Like the divine guidance comes through people a lot of the time, through others. And we need to be humble enough to be able to listen to that. Um, and that advice is actually, truth is actually simple. Truth is precise. That's what I mean about making sure that the words don't lose their meaning. Um, and so when you understand that actually the highest truth is very simple and precise, then it allows you to come back to that knowing as needed on this path, so that you don't stay stuck for too long, you don't stay looping for too long, and you actually truly make progress on this path. Um, and understanding that this path is not, this path is simple, but it's also not what you want it to be. You know, there is truth, there is objective truth and reality, there is an objective organic ascension path. Um, and the fact that it's simple doesn't mean that you're going to be happy about it. A lot of the time, the simplicity of what I needed to do was also the most painful, if that makes sense. So there are actually two quotes that I want to share today. Also know that when I share quotes on my videos, I actually do it very intentionally, to drive you to some resources or books that have been very helpful for me on this journey, because I understand how knowledge works, and how this path of gaining more understanding and wisdom works. It's not as simple as hearing it from someone. Sometimes we need to go deeper, and so when I share a quote from a book, if you feel called to it, it's an invitation to actually go and read that book for yourself, so you can get into what I'm saying, in a much deeper way. And also understanding that if I recommend a book, it doesn't mean that I agree with 100% of what's written there, but it means that there's a lot of wisdom that's in those books, and I'm very grateful that those books even exist, right? So the first quote is from the book called In the Light of Truth. To mask its own shortcomings and limitations, the intellect takes every occasion of emphasizing its contempt for the simplicity of the truth, which it fears will one day be a danger. It dresses up in cap and bells and makes use of high-flown language to attract attention to its own importance nowadays more than ever. But as for those who so despise the simplicity of truth, their contempt has turned to nervousness. They continually add bells to their gaudy foolscap and jingle them louder and louder by their bounds and antics, for they wish to retain their borrowed throne. Of late, these bounds suggest a dance of despair about to end in a dance of death. Then indeed, truth in all her simplicity will be seated on the throne that by right is hers, and her crown will radiate peace-bringing light, consoling and comforting. The serious seeker who has been much confused by the preposterous obstacles intentionally put in the way of understanding higher problems will at last gain a sure foothold. He will without effort be able to grasp the whole truth, whereas up till now it cost great trouble to unearth even the smallest atom. Let us return to simplicity of thinking. For if we do not, we shall never grasp the whole truth nor retain it. This is the meaning of Christ's admonition. If you do not become as little children, you shall in no wise enter into the kingdom of heaven. The complicated way of thinking of the present day will never put a man on the road to truth. It is the same in religious teaching. When men say sorrow and affliction further religious spiritual growth, they are right. But this grain of truth they mischievously dress up to disfigure it. For God does not want his people afflicted. He wants joy, love, and happiness to be theirs on their way to the light. And this cannot be otherwise. If they find stones on their path, man himself has put them there. I think this quote is actually incredible because it touches on so many nuggets of wisdom. A lot of the stuff that I was talking about, that we actually fear truth in a way. We fear the fact that it can be so simple. And, actually understanding that maybe it's because we don't understand the divine guidance. What he says at the end, that God doesn't want us to struggle so hard and jump through hoops and, make this path so complicated for us. I don't view this path as a spiritual initiation in the sense that a lot of people think about, as in, survival of the fittest. I don't view that at all. I think this path is accessible to everyone. It's just that we've overcomplicated it. And it's made even more complicated with a lot of people online who don't really understand much, who don't have a deep understanding, deep wisdom, who make it really confusing for everyone. And the second quote that I have is from a book called Divine Providence by Emanuel Swedenborg. And the quote is, "The truth is, though, that the simpler and purer anything is, the greater and fuller it is. This is why the more deeply we look into anything, the more amazing, perfect, and beautiful are the things we see." This quote is just so profound to me because it is actually what this path is about. The deeper and deeper you go into yourself, into your own truth, the deeper and deeper you actually get access to truth with a capital T, divine truth. So much wisdom and understanding. And it feels so pure and so full and so perfect. And you start being amazed actually at how simple and beautiful things are. Manuel Swedenborg actually has a lot of amazing books and resources that I recommend. Amazing people have actually started a foundation called the Swedenborg Foundation, where you can find online all his books for free as PDFs if you want to actually check it out before you purchase his books. So that's what I wanted to discuss today. I think this knowing that simplicity is key is actually a navigation system to allow us to make true progress on this path. Like I've mentioned, this path is overly complicated, not only because our brain is wired for complication at this point, because it's been overly developed at the expense of our spiritual connection, and we need to bring about some balance, but also because it's made very confusing and overcomplicated by the fact that a lot of the information that's popular out there is actually based on getting deeper into the complexity of things. And that makes sense. It's because everyone's craving it, right? So understanding that will make sure that you listen to that alarm system in your body. And sometimes that alarm system is simply frustration. That's why I'm such a big fan of anger. Anger is actually an amazing emotion that is there for a purpose. It's there to alert us that we're going too far one way, that we have to bring ourselves back to balance. It's trying to alert us to something. And when you get frustrated because you're spending too much time on social media, or because you feel like you've purchased all these, courses and you're not really progressing, it's because you need to stop. That you use that as an alarm system to stop. Just bring everything back to basics, switch everything off, and connect within, connect to that guidance. So that's what I had for you today. I hope this is helpful, and I'll see you next time.